ChatGPT said. It was early morning in a small fishing town by the sea. The sun was just rising, and the orange light touched the water, making it shine like gold. Fishermen and women were getting ready for their day. Nets were being folded, boats were tied, and buckets were lined up neatly. Among them was a woman named Nina. Nina was not just any fisherwoman. She was known by almost everyone in the town. She was strong, quiet, and full of patience. She had grown up near the water, fishing with her father, who had once been a Navy diver. After her father passed away while serving the country, Nina had continued his work fishing, living simply and helping others when she could. Her hair was tied back neatly, and she wore a simple tank top and shorts, the usual clothes for someone who worked in the heat. This morning, Nina had arrived earlier than most. She wanted to set her traps and nets before the sea traffic got busy. Little wooden boat rocked gently at the dock as she loaded it with gear. Birds flew overhead, and the air smelled like salt and fresh wind. Everything felt peaceful. But something was different this time. A new police officer had just been assigned to their town. His name was Officer Brandt. He was not like the other officers who were polite and respectful. This one walked around with dark sunglasses, spoke loudly, and acted like he owned the pier. People were already uncomfortable with how he talked to locals. He often stopped people just to check papers or ask unnecessary questions. That morning, Officer Brandt spotted Nina as she was placing bait into her traps. He walked over quickly and called out, "You there? Stop what you're doing." Nina turned around, confused. She had done nothing wrong. "Yes, officer." She asked calmly, "Do you have permission to be here?" he asked in a cold tone. "Yes," Nina replied. "I have a license to fish here. My name is Nina Fisher. You can check it." Brandt didn't check it. Instead, he looked her up and down a frowned. "You're not dressed appropriately for a public government pier," he said. "You need to be wearing something more ... proper." Nina blinked in surprise. "Sir, I've worn this for years. It's just a tank top and shorts. Everyone here dresses like this. I'm the officer in charge now," he said, standing taller, "and I say this is against the code." People nearby had stopped to watch. Few fishermen whispered among themselves, clearly upset but unsure whether to speak up. Then Brandt said something that shocked everyone. "You want to prove you're safe to fish here? Then go into the water. I need to see if your outfit is safe in case of a fall. You'll do a short swim. Take off everything else and go in your bikini." Nina's face went red. She looked around, knowing people were watching. Her body froze for a moment. She wasn't afraid of the water. She had been swimming since she was a child. But she didn't understand why this was happening. "Officer, that's not necessary. This is not part of any fishing check," she said, trying to keep her voice level. "Do you want to lose your fishing rights today?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. He was serious. Nina knew better than to argue in that moment. She had always believed in calm responses. She also knew something Officer Brandt didn't. She had people watching out for her, even if they weren't standing beside her. Without saying more, she nodded and walked over to a quiet part of the dock. She took off her cover shirt and stepped down into the water wearing her simple bikini, the same one she used while cleaning fish or jumping in for nets. She swam a slow, short circle as he watched with crossed arms. People around the pier were quiet. Some had phones. One teenager quietly recorded the whole thing, hiding the phone behind a backpack. Nina came out of the water, dripping, but not broken. She picked up her towel and dried her face. She didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't cry. She simply took out her phone and made a call. It rang once. A deep voice answered on the other end. She said 3 words. "He did it." Then she hung up. She looked at Officer Brandt one last time and walked away, leaving wet footprints on the dock. Brandt stood there, smug, believing he had shown power. He didn't know that he had just made the worst mistake of his new career. Nina walked home, changed into dry clothes, and sat on her porch with a cup of tea. Her face was calm, but inside, memories of her father filled her heart. He had taught her about dignity and strength, to never let anger break her, but to use wisdom and patience like armor. 30 minutes later, the wind over the ocean changed. The pier would never be the same again. ChatGPT said. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the calm sea reflected its golden light. But there was tension in the air around the pier. People were still talking in hushed voices about what had happened earlier that morning. Nina, the quiet and hard-working fisherwoman, had been ordered into the water by the new police officer, Officer Brandt, in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. Many of the locals had watched the scene with disbelief. Some had taken pictures. What? Young man named Amir had filmed the entire thing from behind a stack of crates. He had grown up watching Nina fish every day, and he admired her strength and kindness. He knew something was wrong, and he had captured it all on video without being noticed. After Nina had made that short phone call, just 3 words, he did it, she disappeared from the pier. But whispers began to spread. People were calling their friends, telling family members, and checking social media. Within minutes, the story was already growing. Nina, meanwhile, was sitting quietly on her porch, her fishing gear set aside. She had changed into clean, dry clothes. Her hands were steady as she held a cup of tea, but her mind was full of thoughts. She didn't regret what she had done. She had faced the situation with dignity, but she also knew something had to change. Far out on the sea, something began to move. A small black shape appeared on the horizon, followed by another, and then more. The Navy boats had left their base quietly, but with purpose. On board was Commander Elias, a man who had served with Nina's father many years ago. When he received Nina's call, he had not asked questions. He had simply stood up from his desk, called for a team, and set out toward the town. Back at the pier, Officer Brandt was still patrolling. He walked like he owned the place, with his chest out and sunglasses hiding his eyes. He stopped a young boy and asked him what he was carrying in his basket. The boy looked frightened and mumbled something. Brandt didn't even listen, just waved him off and continued walking. Other officers in the town had started to hear about what had happened. Some were unsure what to believe. Brandt was new, and they didn't know him well. But they all knew Nina. They knew her story. And they knew how respected her family was, especially her late father, a hero in the Navy who had saved lives during his service. One of the older officers, Officer Karim, walked slowly to the pier and looked out at the sea. His sharp eyes noticed something unusual. "Is that?" he whispered to himself. He stepped closer and saw several Navy boats speeding toward the pier in perfect formation. Their flags flapped in the wind, and the sun gleamed off their sharp edges. They were moving fast, and they weren't stopping for anyone. People at the pier began to notice too. One man pointed, and another dropped his fishing line in surprise. Within minutes, dozens of people were gathered near the water, staring at the approaching boats. Some took out their phones. Others simply watched in silence, sensing that something serious was about to happen. Brandt saw the boats too. At first, he looked amused. "What are they doing here?" he said loudly, trying to sound casual. Inside, he felt uneasy. He had no idea why Navy boats would be coming to a quiet pier in a fishing town. The boats slowed as they reached the edge of the dock. Then, without a word, Navy officers stepped off in formation. At the front of the group was Commander Elias, dressed in crisp navy blue, his face calm but firm. Officer Karim approached the commander and saluted. "Commander Elias, sir. Welcome." "We weren't expecting." Elias nodded politely. "We're here on official business. Please gather everyone." Karim turned and blew a short whistle. People gathered quickly. The pier was now crowded with townspeople, fishermen, women, children, and a few tourists who didn't know what was going on but sensed it was something big. Nina returned to the pier at that moment. She walked slowly but confidently, dressed in her regular fishing clothes again, her head held high. The crowd made space for her. Some nodded in support. Others simply stepped back and watched. Elias saw her and gave a slight smile. "Good to see you, Lieutenant Fisher," he said, using her honorary title. Nina gave a respectful nod. "Thank you for coming." And Commander Elias turned to face the crowd. "This morning we received a report and a video recording involving a serious incident on this pier. A civilian was ordered to do something unnecessary and inappropriate while simply doing her job. That civilian is also the daughter of a fallen Navy hero. and part of our extended family." The crowd was silent. Elias continued. "The officer involved acted beyond his authority. This is not how any citizen should be treated, especially one who has given so much to this country." Officer Brandt stepped forward, trying to defend himself. "Sir, I was just doing my job. She was not dressed properly. I followed procedure." Elias looked at him firmly. "Which procedure asks a fisherwoman to swim in a bikini as proof of safety?" Brandt's mouth opened, but no words came out. Elias turned to the other officers. "We've reviewed video evidence and eyewitness reports. Officer Brandt is being placed under official investigation. Effective immediately, he is relieved of duty." Gasps came from the crowd. Some people clapped quietly. Others stood in shock. Two Navy officers walked toward Brandt. He looked around, but there was no support. Even the officers from the local station did not move to help him. He had crossed the line, and now he would face the consequences. As Brandt was led away, Nina stood quietly. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just looked out at the sea, where the boats floated gently. The same sea where she had grown up fishing with her father. Commander Elias turned to Nina once more. "You showed patience and strength today, the kind your father would be proud of." "Thank you, sir," she said softly. The crowd began to leave, many walking over to Nina to offer quiet words of support. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others simply nodded with respect. That day, something changed at the pier. People remembered that silence in the face of wrong was just as harmful as the wrong itself. And they remembered that sometimes strength doesn't need to shout, it simply stands firm, waits, and lets justice come on its own tide. The Navy. Boats stayed at the dock for a while longer, their presence reminding everyone that respect, justice, and dignity still mattered, even in the quiet corners of the world. Nina sat quietly on an old wooden bench near the pier, watching the waves gently move back and forth. The water sparkled under the sun, but her thoughts were not calm. What had happened that morning was still fresh in her mind. Even though Officer Brandt had been taken away by the Navy, her heart still carried a deep heaviness. She looked around. The people who had gathered earlier were now gone. The pier was slowly returning to normal. Fishermen were back to their boats, mending nets, checking traps, and talking in soft voices. Yet something had changed. The pier didn't feel the same. It was as if the entire town had woken up from a long sleep. Nina sipped from her flask of tea and thought about her father. He had always told her, never fight fire with fire, fight it with truth. Let the truth burn brighter. She had done that today. She had not shouted, not argued. She had stood strong in silence. And now, people had seen what truth looked like. A small group of children came near her. One of them, a girl named Salma, held out a flower she had picked. From nearby, "This is for you, Miss Nina," she said shyly. "My father said you were very brave." Nina smiled warmly and accepted the flower. "Thank you, Salma. That means a lot." The children sat near her for a while, listening as she told them a story about her father and how he once saved a fisherman lost at sea. Their eyes were wide with wonder, and their laughter felt like fresh air. For a few moments, Nina forgot the sadness. Meanwhile, at the local police station, confusion filled the room. Officer Karim, the older and more experienced officer, was talking with the station chief. He had just received formal word from the Navy that Officer Brandt would face a full inquiry. He had broken several codes of conduct and had misused his power. The video taken at the pier had already reached regional officials. The chief let out a heavy sigh. This could have been avoided if Brandt had shown a little respect. Karim nodded. Gosh. He didn't know who she was, and more importantly, he didn't care to find out. Back at the pier, Nina stood up and walked slowly to her boat. She untied the ropes and began to check her fishing lines. Even after the morning's drama, she still had work to do. The sea waited for no one. It didn't stop for pain, or pride, or politics. It simply kept flowing. As she pushed her boat gently into the water, someone called her name. Nina. She turned around and saw a man approaching. He wore a dark blue navy jacket and carried a folder under his arm. It was Officer Daniel from the naval base. someone she had met years ago during a memorial for her father. "I was asked to deliver this to you," he said, handing her the folder. She opened it. Inside was a formal letter from Commander Elias. It read, "Dear Nina, today, your actions reminded us all of what quiet strength looks like. You honored your father, not just with your silence, but with your courage. I have taken the liberty of nominating you for the civilian honor for bravery and dignity from our Navy Division. You may choose to accept or decline. I will respect your decision." With deep respect, Commander Elias Nina read the letter twice. She felt her hands tremble slightly, not because she wanted recognition, but because it reminded her that her father's legacy still lived on in the hearts of others. "Thank you," she said to Danielle, closing the folder gently. "I'm honored," he smiled. "We all are." Later that afternoon, word had spread through the town that Nina might be honored by the Navy. People began to talk more openly. Some visited her home just to say thank you. The same people who had remained silent earlier now wanted to stand by her side, but Nina wasn't angry with them. She understood. Fear does strange things to people. Sometimes it makes them freeze. Sometimes it makes them turn away. But sometimes when the truth becomes too big to ignore, it wakes something inside them. That evening, the town council gathered at the community hall. They invited Nina to attend. At first, she didn't want to go. But then she thought about the young girls who had watched her that morning. She thought about how they needed to see what strength really looked like. She walked to the hall just as the sun was setting. Inside, the mayor stood up and asked everyone to remain silent for a moment. He looked at Nina and said, "This morning, something happened that reminded us all of how important it is to speak up when we see wrong. But more importantly, it reminded us how powerful silence can be when it's filled with courage." He motioned for her to come forward. She did, slowly. As the room clapped quietly, "We failed you," the mayor continued. "We failed to protect one of our own. But you showed us that dignity does not come from uniforms or titles. It comes from how we treat others and how we hold ourselves, even in pain." He handed her a small pin, the town's symbol of honor, and added, "This is a way of saying we see you and we stand with you." Nina accepted it with grace, then spoke softly into the microphone. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just remembered what my father taught me. When you face the tide, don't fight it with fear. Stand still, and it will pass. What matters is what you do after it's gone." The hall was silent again, this time out of respect. That night, Nina returned home and placed the Navy folder beside a photo of her father. She looked at the picture. A smiling man in a diving suit, standing next to a younger version of herself, and whispered, "I hope I made you proud." The wind blew gently through the open window. Somewhere in the distance, waves crashed softly against the rocks, and in that moment, the whole town knew things were different now. And they owed it to the fisherwoman who had stood still in the face of a storm. The day after the Navy boats arrived at the pier, the town was filled with a quiet but strong energy. People talked in small groups, sharing their thoughts and feelings. They were proud of Nina, the fisherwoman who had stood up to injustice with calm courage. But the most important part was yet to come. Officer Brandt was waiting at the local police station. He was no longer confident or proud. He sat alone in a small office, staring at the walls. The weight of the Navy investigation pressed down on him. He knew the video of his actions was being seen by many people, not just in the town, but beyond. He was beginning to realize that what he had done was wrong. Meanwhile, at the pier, Nina arrived early in the morning, just as she always did. The sun was low, casting soft colors over the sea. She was dressed in her usual fishing clothes, carrying her nets and tools, but today she was not alone. Commander Elias was walking toward the pier, surrounded by several Navy officers. His face was calm but serious. He had come back to the town to meet Nina and to speak with the local police. When Nina saw him, she greeted him with a nod. "Thank you for coming again, sir," Elias smiled. "It is the least I can do. Your bravery deserves respect." They walked together toward the dock. The morning air was cool and the sound of waves filled the silence between them. People nearby stopped their work to watch the two important figures talking quietly. Suddenly, Officer Brandt arrived at the pier. He looked around, confused and nervous. He tried to act strong, but his eyes showed fear. Commander Elias turned. To him, Officer Brandt, we need to talk. Brandt swallowed hard and nodded. The Navy officers and some local police formed a small circle around them. Everyone could hear what was said. Elias spoke clearly and firmly. Your actions yesterday were a serious misuse of your authority. You humiliated a citizen who was only trying to do her job. That is not how we serve the community.
Brandt
Tried to defend himself. I was just enforcing the rules. She was not dressed properly for the pier. That is not a rule, Elias answered. And even if it were, there are proper ways to enforce rules with respect and fairness. Brandt lowered his head. He realized his mistakes were many. Elias continued. Because of your behavior, you will be suspended from duty while the investigation is completed. There will also be training on proper conduct. If you cannot respect the people you serve, you do not belong in this job. Brandt said nothing more. He was escorted away by 2 officers. The crowd around the pier watched quietly. Some whispered, others nodded. Many were relieved to see justice being done. After the conversation ended, Elias turned back to Nina. We want to help you and your family. We will provide support for your fishing work and make sure you are treated fairly. Nina looked at him gratefully. Thank you, Commander. That means a lot. At that moment, the mayor of the town arrived. He stepped forward and addressed the people who had gathered. We owe Nina and her family a great apology. Our town should have protected her, not let her suffer. He paused and then said, starting. Today, we will create new rules to ensure that no one will ever be treated unfairly here again. We want this town to be a place where everyone feels safe and respected. People applauded softly. Some wiped tears from their eyes. The mayor continued, also, we will name this pier the Fisher's Watch Pier in honor of Nina and her father. Their courage and dedication remind us of the strength in our community. Nina felt a warmth inside her chest. She had never wanted attention or praise. She had only wanted to live with dignity and work peacefully. But now, she saw that her quiet strength had made a difference. Later that day, Nina stood by the water's edge. She watched the sun begin to set, painting the sky with pink and orange colors. Her boat floated nearby, waiting for her next journey. Young girls from the town came to her side. They looked at her with admiration and hope. One of them said, Miss Nina, will you teach us to fish like you? She smiled gently. Yes, I will. And I will teach you how to be strong, not just with your hands, but with your heart. The girls smiled back, excited and full of dreams. Nina looked at the water again and whispered, This is just the beginning. The town was changing. And so was she. The pier was no longer just a place for fishing. It had become a symbol of respect, courage, and new beginnings. And Nina was proud to be at the center of that change. The days turned into weeks, and the small town by the sea began to feel different. The morning sun still rose over the pier, and the gentle waves kissed the shore as always. The spirit of the place had changed, and much of that change was because of Nina. News of what happened at the pier had traveled far beyond the town. Local newspapers told the story of the brave fisherwoman who had faced unfair treatment and stood her ground with quiet strength. Videos of the incident, the arrival of the Navy boats, and the commander's firm action had gone viral. People from other towns, cities, and even countries sent messages of support and admiration for Nina. The mayor of the town organized a special ceremony at the pier. It was a bright morning with clear blue skies. Colorful flags waved in the soft breeze, and a large crowd gathered to celebrate a new chapter for their community. The pier was officially renamed Fisher's Watch Pier, a name chosen to honor Nina and her late father, who had been a Navy diver. Nina stood near the edge of the pier, her heart full but calm. She wore simple clothes and held a small bouquet of wildflowers given to her by children from the town. The mayor stepped up to the microphone and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. This pier is not just a place to fish or work. It is a place of courage, respect, and hope. We name it Fisher's Watch to remind us all of Nina Fisher and her family's dedication to this town and our country. May their story inspire us every day." People applauded, and Nina felt a warm glow inside. She glanced toward the sea and thought about her father, how proud he would be to see this moment. After the ceremony, Nina became a symbol in the town and beyond. Schools invited her to speak about courage and dignity. Community groups asked her to share her story. She became a quiet mentor to many young girls who dreamed of strength and independence. But Nina never forgot her simple life. Every morning she woke before dawn and went out to the sea to fish. She taught others not only how to catch fish, but how to live with respect and kindness. The pier was busy again, but the mood was lighter, friendlier. One morning, as the sun painted the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Nina stood at the end of the pier. A small group of children and young adults gathered around her, eager to learn. She showed them how to mend nets, how to read the currents, and how to listen to the sea. A young girl asked, "Miss Nina, how did you stay so brave when that officer made you swim?" Nina smiled gently. "I remembered my father's words. He told me that true strength is quiet. It is in the patience to wait and the courage to stand tall, even when no one else is watching." The children listened closely. Nina looked out at the calm water and said softly, "The sea teaches us many things. How to be strong, how to be patient, and how to keep moving forward, no matter the storms we face." As the day went on, Nina knew that her journey was not just about fishing or fighting unfairness. It was about creating a future where everyone could feel safe and respected. That night, when the town was quiet and the stars twinkled above, Nina sat on her porch. She looked at the photo of her father, holding his diving helmet, smiling with pride. She whispered, "Thank you for teaching me to be strong. I will keep your spirit alive." The wind carried her words gently across the water, as if the sea itself was listening. And so, the fisherwoman who had been forced to swim in a bikini became a beacon of hope, a reminder that courage can change a town, heal a community, and inspire generations to come. The pier stood proud, the boats danced on the waves, and Nina smiled, ready for whatever the next day would bring.